Our last speaker is one of the best we have, so you're very, very exclusive circle getting the information he provides to you. His name is Darko Atijas. He's an Australian living in Great Britain, came over from France today just to give you the keynote. And his topic is Progress or Perish, the technology flywheel. And I would more translate it into live or die. So he's going to give us some really nice thing of artificial intelligence and the progress to business. Darko.
Hi everyone. Firstly, just a quick introduction. My name is Darko Atijas, so Sales Director for Neopost Shipping. This is not a sales pitch today. I actually wanted to present you a topic that I'm personally really passionate about and something that I've defined my career around as well. But I will give you just a quick overview of Neopost Shipping. So does anyone here not shop with Amazon Prime? Does anyone not use Amazon Prime? Interesting. Okay, cool. So in the UK, normally there's no hands, literally no hands. And I guess from a consumer's perspective, they're doing some really interesting things in the industry, and it's affecting not just e-commerce more broadly, but there's other aspects to it. From a consumer's perspective, I use them because they're massively convenient. So one example, I have an 18-month-old son, and since we had a kid, Amazon Prime has become the law. I mean, if we need something, we order Amazon Prime and we have it almost instantly. We ordered some wet wipes for my son. Filthy little midget, got a bit dirty, and he really needed to be cleaned up. So we ordered something at about 2 to 2, and before you know it, it was there at 6 o'clock. But the point of the story is that supply chain as a differentiator is something that Amazon's invested a lot in. So from our perspective, what we're doing is, as Neopost Shipping, we're providing better tools, better technology for retailers and carriers to be able to be more competitive with Amazon. Now, the whole Neopost story is very interesting. We, like other major businesses, have trouble innovating and have trouble really advancing quickly. So we've been developing more through acquisitions. And me personally, I've been in software now for over 10 years. And one defining characteristic is that big businesses, they simply cannot innovate as fast as smaller startups, something we generally understand. So really what I want to talk to you about today is different strategies that big businesses can use to speed up innovation by partnering better with smaller competitors. So the fact is, software is eating everything. I've been personally investing a lot in software tech, so mainly small businesses, and mainly businesses that solve sometimes quite boring problems, but problems that by automating particular issues in different supply chains has innate value to large businesses, and as a result have gone through several exits already, which has been a very profitable investment strategy and has also caused a few more grey hairs. But besides the point, the interesting thing when you look at overall development of human technology development, we haven't even begun yet. I mean, people think that this curve means that we've reached some kind of pinnacle of human existence, but the fact is that we're sitting here. So software eating everything, everything's getting automated. When machines start talking to machines, what happens is we are actually on the cusp of probably one of the biggest shifts in human development that we'll ever see. So the next 10 years are going to be as advancing for us as a society as the previous 40. And the fact is that big business as a general concept often doesn't see this coming. As consumers, we adopt things very quickly, but big business has this innate issue of conservatism and occasionally through management styles burying their head in the sand. One critical example of this that I really love the quote of, when Jim Keyes, the CEO of Blockbuster, was actually quoted saying in Wall Street Journal, saying that neither Redbox nor Netflix presented any kind of competitive challenge to them whatsoever. This is a crucial example of a big business, big established business, just burying their head in the sand and just saying, no, there is no such thing, la la la, we don't have competitors. 18 months later, they were bankrupt. The fact is that since 1960, the average age of an S&P 500 business was over 60 years. If you follow the trend, by 2025, it will be less than 10. So the lifespan of an average business, and we're not talking startups. Startups die, of course they do. We're talking about big, established, stable businesses will, on average, last on the stock market for less than 10 years by 2025. So the speed of evolution is definitely speeding up. So I found this really fascinating. This is a bit small, but if you look at it, it's some interesting names there, like DuPont, etc. Some names that we don't even recognize anymore from 1917. But the big shift, if you look from 1967 to 2017, again, there's virtually no names in the list of the biggest businesses from 1967 that currently exist. And every one of the top 5 businesses currently is dominated by technology companies. And again, that's only speeding up as well. I expect Amazon's going to jump up a few rungs very, very soon. Without being alarmist, clearly, we're a retail event. We love our retailers as a technology supplier, but the fact is that the decline of retailers is actually again accelerated over the past few years. Now, the Americans in particular, the American media loves to be alarmist and they love to use extreme terminology. So there's this term that's been bandied around over the last year called the retail apocalypse. The fact is, 9,000 stores have been closed. A lot more retailers are going bankrupt. I mean, in the last 2 months, we've heard Steinhoff Mobile has issued a profit warning as well. Obviously, a bit closer to home in Europe. So the fact is, this is speeding up. This trend is speeding up, and the issue is, mainly, I mean, if you can attribute it to a singular party, it's certainly Amazon, but also Alibaba is not too far behind as a net contributor to this trend. Amazon's nailed down. I've been thinking about this a lot from a retail perspective. In addition to investing in supply chain as a value proposition, at the very core of Amazon's existence, they've nailed down 3 things. The first thing, if you actually read their very first and original share manual for their IPO in 1997. One of the things that Mr. Bezos said in there was, if you're expecting profits and dividends out of this business, don't buy these shares. So he set that expectation, day one. He said, we're going to be investing in growth, first thing. Second thing is, in everything they do, they put the customer first. It's still one of the easiest apps to use on your phone. It's still one of the easiest websites to use with the buy now button and some other convenient features. And of course, the Prime delivery services. And the third and most important thing that they've really nailed down is this cultural belief and ingrained company culture that encourages failure and encourages them to trial new things over and over and over again. So some of my favorite examples, Amazon invests a lot in R&D, but they're also very efficient. In 2016, they published about 97 patents. So it is an indicator of R&D activity. It doesn't mean all of them are going to be successful, but it's a solid indicator of where their future R&D investment is. So over half is in supply chain. This is my favorite. So this one is a drone nest, so like a beehive that would sit in different areas around urban regions, and it would recharge and use drones to deliver deliveries out of these particular sites. Will we see these in our back gardens or in our neighborhoods anytime soon? I'm not sure. I'm not going to take a bet on that, but certainly they're willing to try to think about these new ideas and to invest in this type of R&D. Another interesting one is the principle of a dirigible. So you have an airborne distribution center where the drones would fly back and forth and charge on the actual dirigible and then deliver down to urban metro areas. So once again, crazy idea that they're willing to fund and finance because patents are cheap in their own right. So certainly you can see where their thinking is over the next 10 years. And it's not just Amazon. The activity in terms of mergers and acquisitions, even for the biggest businesses in that top list, so the Facebooks, Amazons, Apples, and Googles of the world, they're actually acquiring more and more tech businesses by merger and acquisition activity. And that's because their own innovation cycles have slowed down as well. So they're actually encouraging this type of behavior. And, I'm not a big fan of Mr. Trump, but one of the smart things that he did was these 4 businesses have $700 billion stashed offshore, retained profits and earnings, and he's reduced the repatriation tax for those funds. So there's potentially up to $600 billion US that's going to move back from tax havens around the world into the US to assist them with further financing of acquisitions. And if you look at the trends, the main types of acquisition activity in big corporate M&A, so this is their way of accelerating their own technology roadmaps by acquiring businesses through this type of activity. 2013 to 2015, a lot of the major acquisitions of over $1 billion plus were actually technology to technology company acquisitions. So a tech business acquiring another tech business. But what we're seeing in 2016 onwards is non-tech businesses, so more traditional industries, using corporate merger and acquisition type of strategy to acquire new technology. Another interesting example that I'll relate specifically to the German market. Mr. Musk has taken some interesting steps in many different industries. Now you talk about what they're doing. His motivation is a bit more altruistic. Yeah, they're there to make profit and to obviously develop new concepts, but when you listen to him speak, it's more about driving competitiveness in pinch points in human development. So if you're talking about energy or space travel, he's actually stimulating competition by starting up new businesses and generating interest in those industries. So because we're in Germany, I'll talk about the car industry. So I think we're all familiar with Tesla. He's had great success in raising obscene amounts of capital. If you contrast it to General Motors or your Mercedes or your Audi, Tesla, in my opinion, is an overvalued business right now, if you look at some of the competitors. But what it's allowed them to do is raise capital cheaply in order to invest in electric vehicles. And you can attest, you can see it as a consumer. With Tesla now on the roads, a lot of the major car manufacturers, your Mercedes, your Audis, etc., are actually investing now a lot more in energy-efficient vehicles and electric vehicles. Another interesting one is Spacex. So in the intersect of transportation, logistics, and cars and mobility, SpaceX has the first reusable rocket. So they're the first. All the governments of the world, USSR previously, and US and NASA, etc. It took a private business to create the world's first reusable rocket. So now they can send satellites to space for cheap. They're going to be using this to reduce the cost of international transportation. And there's already talk of by 2024-5, they'll be having private transportation options as well, where you can fly, for example, from New York to Sydney in less than 2 hours. So hugely disruptive. And again, whether big businesses actually see them as a competitor is something that I'm questioning. Are the boardrooms of Mercedes and Audi, or DHL for that matter, actually talking about Elon Musk's portfolio of businesses as potential disruptive competitors? That's what I'm really questioning. So back to retail. There's an interesting shift, even on a small island like the UK where I live, and UK is very, very advanced in terms of e-commerce and e-commerce logistics. Over the last 2 years, there's been a big pinch point in the shift to online, because volumes have been increasing. Amazon has been taking a lot more prime delivery space on vehicles and competing, ironically, with not ironically, competing with the carriers themselves, but at the same time taking prime space on the carriers and impacting the retailers and their ability to service their own customers by reducing the quality of service. So there's a big shift now with retail in the UK, even on the small island with very, very well developed logistics, for retailers to shift stock much closer to the customer. So even though people have been talking about omni-channel and multi-channel commerce for a very, very long time, now there is very acute pressure to actually move stock much closer to the customer and create new transactions around how a customer can obtain stock. So let's talk about the history of evolution of retail quickly, just in relation to this. So where retail started was Wolfgang there had his own store. He would know the name of each of his customers. He would do the shopping for them. He would actually fill the basket for his customers, have a very intimate personal relationship with his customers. We moved to this, your big Walmarts, your Tesco's, your Aldi's of the world, where we as customers we are being told by those big retailers the brands we should prefer based on where they're putting them on shelves. But of course, what e-commerce has forced is a lot more choice for us as consumers. So now, what we're seeing, big blue chip traditional retailers, they're having to obviously fight and use their competitive advantage to battle the big online beasts. And some good examples of that recently, and I say recently because there's been a lot more announcements about innovation in this space over the last 6 months. One example is Walmart in the US recently invested in about 100 parcel towers. So you can do click and collect using a robotic parcel locker tower where you can basically scan your item and it will bring out your delivery to you. Another example again is Walmart using their stores as 3PL locations, delivery locations, so filling them with e-commerce stock rather than just in-store stock. Another example is Zara. So Zara in London, specifically, they announced that their London flagship, all click and collect, irrespective of source, will be put into an automated parcel locker service. So they will have several hundred parcel lockers in the main flagship store where all click and collect will be fully automated. Another example is, again, Zara. I went shopping. I made the mistake of going shopping with my wife a couple of weeks ago. And she had a click and collect order. And I promise you I didn't follow her into the changing rooms, but she went to the changing rooms and she was actually able to try the item in the changing room, purchase the item in the changing room and walk out with that item without having to wait in line. So they're making these types of innovations, and the terminal looks a little bit similar to this. It's a bit more simple than that, but certainly you can facilitate a payment and a collection then and there in the changing room. So retailers are investing a lot in combating that trend. Likewise, again, I'm a nerd. I do look at patents occasionally, but another example is Google. So Google's now moving into this store-based automation space where unmanned motorized transportation units will be collecting click and collect items or items delivered to the store, potentially to the end customer. So again, they're investing a lot in the innovation around click and collect and the automation of the last mile from the store directly. Another example and by the way, you have access to all this information anyway, but Amazon and Alibaba, ironically, are now also moving back into bricks and mortar. So Amazon Go is not the only thing that's happening. Alibaba has some very interesting innovations where in their physical Tmall or Taobao branded spaces in China, you can use WeChat with a QR code to scan into a robotic basket. And that basket will follow you around the store. It will recognize all the items that you're putting inside the basket. You basically pack those items and you can walk straight out the store and it will charge directly onto your WeChat payment mechanism. Additionally, they're also investing a lot in acquiring businesses that are automating that store-based process, the in-store experience. Skip that for a sec. So we'll just quickly talk about AI and automation. So AI is clearly going to speed this whole trend, both from robotics as well as obviously the actual software aspect. In our space, so if we talk about supply chain, technology and retail, it's been estimated that around 4.6 million jobs are at risk, in direct risk over the next 5 years from automation. And in warehouse, in automation of warehouses, another 2.4 million. So a lot of investment will be happening in the space over the next 5 years, and it will affect clearly the human capital aspect as well. But I guess I'm an optimist. I think a lot of those people will get retrained to do other things, and clearly there's things that retailers can also do to combat this trend in general as a mechanism to speed up their own cycle of innovation. So I've talked a little bit about mergers and acquisitions. I'll just talk about some other options that retailers and traditional businesses have. So my first example is John Lewis. So John Lewis, major tier 1 retail brand. They have something called J Labs in London. So J Labs is an incubator. John Lewis put in something like 60 to 100 million pounds in any given year to fund and finance startup ideas. So I guess the comparison is, in this type of model, do you invest 10 million in a single project, okay? So big, you use your outsourcer, you can hire, I don't know, your Accenture or Capgemini, invest 10 million and hope that this project would work. Or do you get 100 startups, give them 100,000 each and spread your bets and get them to solve the problem, and at the same time you can actually retain ownership of those businesses and also use your own presence as a trial site for them. I think it's a much faster way to iterate and fail quickly. Another example, again, this isn't a corporate plug, but we are proud of it. We as Neopost Shipping have partnered with British Airways. So British Airways, again, another traditional industry. They have empty space on aircraft that they wanted to fill. So one direction across the Atlantic, they're full of passengers, they're full of goods and freight, and coming back from the US, there's a lot more space. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to create an e-commerce product where they could directly fill the bellies of empty aircraft with e-commerce parcels. So they partnered with us to actually help them connect all the different parties that are necessary for this to happen. And as a part of our agreement, I can't disclose too much, but I'm happy to talk to you offline. We actually also act as their main channel partner. So we're plugging them into different shopping carts, freight forwarders, and other sources of orders. So it's a very functional partnership. And obviously it saved them a lot of money, but at the same time, on our side, it's a great product and a great opportunity for us to develop as well. Another example is, again, one joint venture that we had with Yamato, so big, major, traditional delivery business in Japan. They wanted to develop their own click and collect facility. Japanese love robots, so they wanted to do something automatic. So what we've done over the last 2 years in partnership with them under joint venture, we've significantly accelerated their ability to roll out a PUDO network of 1,300 lockers in less than 2 years. So JVs are a very good mechanism to accelerate technology development where there's a compatible offering. So another example of a successful JV being structured. I don't know if anyone's invested in cryptocurrencies. I'm not a big fan personally, but I think in terms of blockchain as a technology has huge merits and huge value. One very good example of a joint venture where two traditional businesses have looked at their core competencies and have said, right, IBM has a lot of expertise in blockchain. Maersk was an existing customer. They came together and they created a special purpose vehicle to investigate the opportunities for blockchain in automating supply chain. So if anyone here has been involved in any complex cross-border transactions, there's a huge amount of paperwork and a huge paper trail that exists to successfully facilitate any kind of trade for that matter. There's a huge amount of documentation. So what they're betting on is the fact that through use of blockchain, they can actually automate that process. So back to successes. just to end on a high, Walmart, I think, has been an exceptional example of a retailer that's really put their foot on the ground and has used their existing store estate, the power of their brand and their extensive supply chain, and obviously their extensive store-based network. And at the same time, using the ability to leverage the capital to acquire technology. At the time, I remember reading about the acquisition of Jet.com. They were ridiculed in the media quite a lot in terms of, they overspent 2.3 billion. This is crazy. What are you doing? But in reality, over the last 2 years, and a traditional business, shareholders are number one, clearly. The share performance doesn't lie. So if you want an example of a big retailer that's actually really nailed and appeased both the media, the shareholders, and also I guess their own strategic imperative through the use of acquisitions, Walmart is a very, very solid example with Jet.com and some other investments they've made recently. So in conclusion, it's not all doom and gloom. That's fact. There is things that the traditional businesses can do and retailers can do. I'm just saying that just don't bury your head in the sand. Just realize that everything's getting faster and faster. And if you are going to partner successfully with other technology businesses, outsourcing, incubators, joint ventures, or straight up mergers and acquisition is also all valid options to accelerate your own technological and innovation chain. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darko. Hang on a little bit.